So, up to this point, we have talked about two different factoring techniques. We've talked about the greatest common factor, which is something that we always look for, and we talked about factor by grouping, which is going to be a 4-term polynomial. So the next thing we're going to talk about is factoring trinomials of the form x squared plus bx plus c, which means your leading coefficient is 1. So when you come across a trinomial, look at that leading coefficient. So factoring trinomials of the form, again, x squared plus bx plus c, your leading coefficient is 1. What we're going to do is we're going to undo the full method. So if you remember how to do the full method on a review, you take the first times first and you get x squared. And then x times 4 is 4x, and then 2 times x is 2x, and 2 times 4 is 8. And then you combine, add those middle terms, or the like terms. So to factor x squared plus bx plus c into a binomial times a binomial, note that b, to get this middle term, what we did is we added these two numbers. And to get c, to get this 8, we had to multiply two numbers. So what we're going to be looking for is two numbers who we can multiply together to get that last term, but add together to get that middle term. So if there are fewer choices for the products, so that's what we're going to start with. We're going to start by trying to multiply things rather than adding things. Alright, so to factor a trinomial whose leading coefficient is 1, what you're going to do is you're going to open up two sets of parentheses. You're going to decide on your signs. So here's how we can decide on our signs, and I have a chart for you. If the signs are the same, and we'll match the first sign if the last sign in the trinomial is positive. The signs are going to be different if the last sign in the trinomial is going to be negative. So for example, this last sign right here. If this sign is positive, then the two signs in here are going to be the same. If this sign is negative, then these two signs are going to be different. And then what you're going to do is you're going to place the square root of the first term in the trinomial in the first two places. So that's going to go here and here. So the square root of x squared is just going to be x times x. And then this is where that comes into play. You're going to find the factors of the last term in the trinomial that will add up to be the second term in the trinomial and place them in the second place in the binomial. So in other words, it's what can I multiply together to get this number, but add together to get that number. And there's only one set of numbers, one pair of numbers, I call it the magic pair, that go here and here. Alright, so here's that table that I was telling you about. If in your problem you have plus plus, then your answer for your binomials is going to be plus plus. If you have minus plus, you're going to have minus minus. Notice if the last sign is positive, the two signs in your answer have to be the same and they're going to match that first sign. So again, if in your problem you have plus minus or minus minus, the signs are going to be different. So here, if the second sign is negative, doesn't matter. If the second sign is negative, then these two are going to be opposites. So it'd be helpful if you wrote down that chart so you would know what your signs are going to be. Alright, so let's try this one first. So what we have is x squared plus 13x plus 30. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up two sets of parentheses and decide on my signs. Now using my chart, this sign is positive, so I know these two signs have to be the same and they're going to match that first sign. So I'm going to get a plus plus. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the square root of x squared and put that in the first spots. And then I always make a little table. It's what I can multiply together to get 30, but add together to get 13. So what I do, this is multiply, and this is add or subtract, depending on your signs. So what I do is I list all the factors of 30. So I have 1, 30, 2, 15, 3, 10, and 5, and 6. Now, with all of the pairs that you can multiply together to get 30, there's only one pair that will add together to give you 13, and that's this pair here. And so that's going to be 3 and 10. And that's how you factor a trinomial where your leading coefficient is 1. So let's practice again. X squared minus 11x plus 24. So we have a trinomial. My leading coefficient's 1. Once you can look at a polynomial and know what you've got to remember the process on how to factor it. This is a trinomial with a leading coefficient of 1. So the process is open up two sets of parentheses and decide on your signs. Notice the second sign is plus, so go to your table. The two signs in your answer have to be the same, and they're going to match that first sign. So these are going to be minus and minus. Take the square root of x squared, which is going to be x, and think, what can I multiply together to get 24, but add together to get negative 11? Sign in front of the number goes with that number. So my signs are the same, so I'm going to be adding. Remember, this is multiply, and this is add or subtract. Well, if your signs are the same, you're going to add. If the signs are different, you're going to subtract. So since my signs are the same, I'm going to be adding these two numbers together. So let's list all the factors of 24. So we have 1, 24, 2, 12, 3, 8, 4, 6, and that's it. But only one set of these numbers will add together to give me 11, and that's going to be the 8 and the 3. So that's going to go here and here. Let's try again. Trinomial, leading coefficient's 1. Open up two sets of parentheses. Decide on your signs. This is a negative. Since the second sign is negative, the two signs in your parentheses are going to be different. And it doesn't matter if you put plus with one in the first one and minus in the second one, or vice versa. That doesn't matter. And then you're going to split your x squared into x times x. Now, this is going to be a little more complicated. And the reason I say that is because our signs are different. So it's what we can multiply together to get 35, but subtract to get 2. So let's list all of the factors of 35. We have 1 and 35. We have 5 and 7. And I think that's it. Only one pair will subtract to give us 2, and that's going to be the 5 and the 7. But the bigger number has to carry this sign. The bigger number has to carry the first sign in your problem. So my bigger number is 7, and it has to carry the negative, so it has to go over here with this negative. So just remember, your bigger number has to carry the sign. Alright, pause the video and try this one on your own. So let's try it. See how you did. Open up two sets of parentheses. Signs are going to be minus and minus. Split your x squared into x, and think, what can I multiply together to get 10? But add, because my signs are the same, but add together to get 6. So my factors are going to be 1, 10, 2, and 5. And I don't see anything else. None of these will add up to give me 6, which means this is prime or non-factorable. It won't factor. So, and when anything doesn't factor, so in other words, if you can't get anything to multiply together to get 10 and then add together to get 6, which we can't, then your answer is going to be prime. What about multiple variables? What are we going to do with that? Well, watch what happens. It's a trinomial. My leading coefficient's 1, so I'm still going to do the same process. Open up two sets of parentheses. My signs are going to be plus and plus. And then I'm going to take the square root of x squared and put that up front. But I'm also going to take the square root of the y squared and put that back there. Now, all I have to do is think, what can I multiply together to get 6, but add to get 5 because the signs are the same. So I get 1 and 6 and 2 and 3, and that's going to be 2 and 3. That's going to go with this y. So multiple variables are not that big of a deal. If you have multiple variables, just know you're going to have your first term here, and your last term is going to carry that variable this time. What about higher exponents? Well, you have a trinomial. Your leading coefficient's 1. There's nothing in common with all of these. So we're going to open up two sets of parentheses, plus and minus. Now, or plus and plus rather. Notice that I looked at all of these to see if there was something in common. And the reason I did that is because if you have a higher degree polynomial, in other words, if your exponents are bigger than a squared, most of the time there are going to be things in common, and so you need to look for a greatest common factor. Okay, so open up two sets of parentheses. My signs are going to be plus and plus. Now, the square root of x to the fourth, we're just going to half it. It's going to be x squared and x squared. What can I multiply together to get 6 and add together to get 5? And we've already done that one. It's going to be 2 and 3. Alright, so look at this. So I have a trinomial. My leading coefficient is not 1. Well, we haven't learned how to factor a trinomial where the leading coefficient is not 1. So that clues me into thinking that there is a greatest common factor of 3. So let's see if we can divide a 3. This is the first technique that you learned how to do. Let's see if we can divide a 3 out of all of these. 3m squared divided by 3 is going to give me m squared. Negative 24m divided by 3 is going to give me negative 8m. And negative 60 divided by 3 is going to give me negative 20. Now, look inside here. I have a trinomial and my leading coefficient is 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring that 3 down. It's got to stay in the problem. And I'm going to factor that inside trinomial with a leading coefficient of 1 using the factoring technique that we're working on. So my signs are going to be different. And I'm going to split the m squared into m and think, what can I multiply together to get negative 20 but add? Actually, this time we're going to subtract because the signs are different to get 8. So let's list the factors of 20. I have 1, 20, 2, 10, and 4 and 5. Which of these can I subtract? Remember, this time we're going to subtract because the signs are different to get 8. And that's going to be 10 and 2. So remember what I told you earlier. The bigger number has to carry that first sign. My first sign is negative, so my 10 has to be negative. And so the 2 is going to be positive. Remember when I was telling you about higher ordered exponents? The higher exponent is higher than x squared. Look for something in common, not to mention my leading coefficient is not 1. So I'm thinking there's going to be a 2 in common with all of these. And I'm thinking there's going to be a minimum of x squared. Remember, you look for the lowest exponent. So let's factor this out of each one of these. If I factor 2x to the fourth by 2x squared, I'm going to get x squared. 26x to the third divided by 2x squared is going to be a minus 13x. And then 84x squared divided by 2 is going to be what, 42? Now, my inside trinomial is a trinomial leading coefficient of 1. So I'm going to open up two sets of parentheses. My signs are going to be minus and minus this time. My x squared is going to split into x, and since my signs are the same, it's going to be what can I multiply together to get 42, but add together to get 13. So I have 1 and 42. I have 2 and 21. I have 3 and, let me use my calculator for that, 14. And I have 6 and 7. And only one of these pairs will add to give me 13, and that's going to be the 6 and the 7. And so that is factored. Factoring trinomials where your leading coefficient's 1. First things first, look for anything in common. Then open up two sets of parentheses, decide on your signs, split your first term into its square root, And then what can you multiply together to get the last term, but add together to get the middle term?